at the end of this presentation, and he is the account manager for the Crown Estate that we manage. Like Ellie said, we are Recora. We were Paper Round or BPR Group, but 2 weeks ago we announced that we're going to change our name to Recora. Reason being, we haven't been bought or anything like that. The reason being, just we're known as different names. So Paper Round, BPR Group, Secure Shredding, Brighton Paper Round. We recently bought another business called Reef, and we just wanted to have one name that incorporated everything. So we're going to be known as Recora moving forward, and the official move will be in November time. And the name comes from Re for recycling, Core for ecology, and then Era as in terra, the earth. So that's where the name comes from. Today we're just doing a webinar on do you know where your waste goes? So just an introduction that we've done, talk a bit about why we recycle and the waste hierarchy, talk a little bit more, expand a bit more on the waste hierarchy and kind of what future legislation is going to look like. Talk a bit about where your recycling actually goes, what actually happens to it once you put it in the bin. Talk a bit around the issues of contamination, and then some tips for at home and at work, what you're going to do, what you can do. So a bit more of an introduction. So we are London-based commercial waste company. We were founded by Friends of the Earth. That's where the name Paper Round came from. Just as a little offshoot organization to see if you could collect office white paper from buildings in London. And then from there, that was in the late 1980s. And since then, we've become a fully fledged waste management company. But those values and those things that the Friends of the Earth, that it started from, the sustainability and social value still runs through the business today. So we like to start these presentations or just kind of thinking about why we recycle. You know, it's been part of our lives for a long time now. But often we don't really sit back and think, well, why do we recycle? So just a couple of things that we kind of are the main reasons why we often think people do recycle. So number one is to reduce waste. You know, it takes quite a long time for plastic to fully decompose, and plastic never actually fully decomposes. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller microplastics. And then if you recycle, then those materials can be used to make other materials. So therefore, we're conserving resources because you're not having to use new or virgin materials to make those things. And especially this kind of goes for new materials being made, but also in terms of food waste and anaerobic digestion, it can be used to replace fossil fuels to generate electricity. It saves energy because, again, with the same idea of conserving resources, it takes less energy to make a plastic bottle or an aluminium can from recycled content than it does from virgin new content. And then the overall reasons for doing these things and why we want to conserve resources, why we want to save energy, why we want to reduce waste is to protect the environment. And kind of this is mainly seen in around the CO2 savings that happen with recycling. And then finally, there's a bit of legal obligation attached to that, which is you're legally obliged as a business to recycle your mixed recycling on site. But that is soon, oh no, next slide. But kind of thinking more about waste and recycling, those are kind of the reasons why we do it, but then you often think about it in the waste hierarchy. So often people think about reduce, reuse, recycle as the waste hierarchy, but we try to expand it a bit further. So you've got landfill at the very bottom and energy recovery. We're a zero to landfill organization, so all your general waste goes to energy recovery. But we don't feel that shouting about zero to landfill is a very big deal, because any good waste management company in our eyes shouldn't be sending things to landfill anyway. And then above that, you've got recycling, so achieving the highest recycling rates possible. But then above that, so the reduce and reuse section, which often gets left behind but is more important, is above that. So creating awareness among staff and reducing waste in the first place. So I want to thank you all for joining today for this webinar to learn more about your waste and recycling, so we can kind of look higher up the waste hierarchy and do more prevention, minimization and reuse. And then I was saying how there was a legal obligation around the waste and recycling, and it's quite minimal at the minute, but there was the Environment Act was introduced in at the end of last year, which is going to have big changes to waste legislation. The Environment Act lays out what is going to happen in the future and what laws are going to be in place, and kind of there was a few different things in it. One of the big ones was compulsory source segregation, and there's two aspects to this. There's food waste. We think that in around Easter time next year, it is going to be a legal obligation for all offices and households to have the ability to have food waste collections. And it's going to be, if your building has more than 5 people in it, then you're going to have food waste collections. So that is one element of it. The other element is that they're going to lay out 6 in total waste streams that have to be collected separately on site. So that would be plastics, cans, food, general waste, paper, and cardboard will be we think will be the compulsory source segregation on site. So this is big change to the waste and resource strategy. There hasn't been a big change in the last couple of decades, and this Environment Act is going to have an actual real impact on offices and commercial buildings in London. And we think the food one will come in, let's say, in around 7-8 months, and then we think the compulsory source segregation, one of the other streams, maybe in more about 1.5 years' time, it'll come into legislation. And then also on top of that, some things that are changing is around the labeling of waste and recycling. So these symbols on the left-hand side, top left-hand side, with the triangles and the arrows, and you obviously look at that and think, oh, that must mean that it's recyclable, but that would be too easy. Those symbols just show the RIC code, so they just tell you what type of plastic it is. So number 1 is your PET, such as your water bottles, and number 2, your HDPE, so like milk cartons. General rule of thumb, this isn't, don't hold me to this, but a general rule of thumb is that numbers 1, 2, and 5 are recyclable, and all the others are not recyclable in your PCPC or your mixed recycling stream. At the bottom, this new legislation that's coming in is that these RIC codes are being replaced with these things at the bottom. So it clearly says what part of that product can be recycled and what can't be recycled. And then it just makes it a lot easier for the consumer of that item to know what can and can't be recycled. And then finally, my favorite symbol on the right-hand side, the green dot. Look at it, it's green, it's got arrows, they're going in a circular motion. Of course, this would mean that that item is recyclable, but unfortunately that again would just be far too easy. This was a symbol as part of an EU directive that was done in 2002, which meant that the manufacturer of that packaging has paid for the safe disposal of that packaging. Now that could mean that the safe disposal could be safely put in landfill for the next 500 years. That doesn't mean that it is going to be recyclable. So that symbol doesn't mean anything, and we should just try and ignore it as much as we can. So that's kind of like a background to recycling, and then a little bit of a look at waste legislation and kind of what things are happening in the industry, but what actually happens to your recycling. So with all your recycling, we collect it from your premises, and then we bring it back to our materials recovery facility. And this picture here is what our materials recovery facility looked like when it was brand new and installed about 3 years ago. It doesn't look as clean and shiny now, but that is what it looked like. And we do tours of this, and I'm sure some of you have been on a couple of visits to our facility to see the hand sorting elements that are still there, the different technologies, the different machinery that's all involved to further segregate the items that we collect. So separating your plastics from your paper, from your cans and cardboard and things like that. After this process, it is then baled up, and then we send it to be reprocessed. And with the waste and recycling that we send off to be reprocessed, we pride ourselves on having very high quality bales coming out of our MRF, and that means we can be quite picky or choosy about where we send our bales to. If we have very low quality bales, then reputable reprocessors don't want our bales because they're full of general waste. And then if reputable ones don't want it, then unreputable ones will want it, and that's because they're cutting corners. And if they're cutting corners, then there's a reason for that, and you don't really want to ask too many questions about what they're doing with their waste and recycling. But we don't have that problem because we've got high quality bales, and we send everything. All our recycling goes within the UK, apart from paper, which goes to northern France. And because we have very close proximity where our bales are going to, we can then do the checks at these reprocessing sites and make sure they're doing what they say they're doing. So whether it be the food at Biogen, go and visit there, or the cardboard or the cans or the coffee cups at James Cropper, we can do these quality checks to reduce any reputational risk that you might have. You might have seen a Panorama documentary last month about TerraCycle, and they were found that they said they were sending all their products to good places, but they were actually turning up in places they shouldn't have been. But we reduce that reputational risk because we visit all these places and we know where we're sending it to. So just going to talk now through some of kind of the main waste streams that we do in the Crown Estate, and just talk a bit more about what we do with them. So our paper cans and plastic containers stream, we collect them, we go back to our materials recovery facility, we sort through them, and then they get sent off to the different places that we just spoke about. With food recycling, so it comes back to our facility, we empty it into the food into a large lorry, and then it gets sent off to anaerobic digestion. With anaerobic digestion, it has two outputs. So it gets put in a big giant stomach thing, and all the heat and gas that's released by the food that's breaking down is captured, and then that's used as biogas to generate electricity. But then the digestate that's left over at the end is then used as biofertilizer, and is used in the agricultural industry in the area, which is used to make food, which then you get and we put in the bin, and then we collect, and so on. So that's a very good circular loop with the food waste. Also with food waste, we have a charity partnership with FareShare, and what we do with them is that for every food waste collection we do, we donate 25p on behalf of our customers, which is the same as a meal for a vulnerable person. And the food they're giving to the vulnerable people isn't, rotten food or out of date food. It is food that goes to Tesco's and the carrot is slightly too wonky, or the packaging is slightly damaged and things like that. So it's perfectly good food. And FareShare, we distribute them to the people in need. So we just got some stats on the left about in 2019 and in 2021, how many meals were donated on behalf of the Crown Estate. And obviously there was a reduction in 2021 because of COVID, and hopefully they'll go back up again soon. And then we also do other volunteering activities. So we do beach cleans. This is on Gabriel's Wharf, just in central London. We can do a beach clean, and at the end, Ellie will talk more about the other volunteering and different activities we're doing with the Crown Estate moving forward. Next waste stream is glass. Glass is a really important item to recycle because it can be recycled an infinite amount of time, as long as it stays in the loop if it goes in the right bin. So we collect the glass, it gets sent to Tilbury, so very near our materials recovery facility. You don't need to separate the glass if it's clear glass or green bottles or brown bottles or anything like that. We can't collect glassware in this waste stream, so any sort of cups or pint glasses, things like that, they need to be collected separately. But any sort of bottles or jars, they can all be collected in this, and then it just gets broken down into pellet type things, a cutlet, and then it's made into new glass. Coffee grounds, another big waste stream that we do at the Crown Estate. We collect them in bins, just like we would do with food, and they get sent to BioBean. And what BioBean do is they'll dry them out, and all the chemicals will be released from it, and they're used in the biofuel and biochemical industry. A lot of makeups use biochemicals from coffee grounds. And then once they're dried up, they're then it's a bit more technical, but they're all squished together and they're made into coffee logs or into little pellets. and these can be used on wood burning stoves or on campfires and things like that. And because of the high calorific content of the coffee grounds, these pellets and these coffee logs are burn extremely hot and very intense. We also do IT equipment and waste electrical equipment collections. This is something that often a lot of our clients don't know about, but we can collect all sort of IT and waste electricals. We have specialist vehicles that come and collect these and kind of divide it up into two categories. Something that is data bearing, so something that will need to be wiped when it's brought back to our facility. We have a Blanco data wiping software, which means that we can securely wipe all the information that's on anything like a mobile phone or a laptop or a computer or anything like that. And then also we collect non-data bearing items, so kettles, toasters, things like that, and then we can collect them and recycle them and repurpose them. And all the documentation that you need for those collections we can provide you with. If it's a hazardous item such as a fridge or an oil-based paint, we can provide that. Or if it just needs to be data wiped, then we can give you a certificate of destruction to say that's been cleared. And then finally, general waste. So with our general waste collections, this is the only thing that doesn't come back to our facility. What we do with general waste is we pick it up and then we tip it on a barge at a tipping station on the river. Closest one for you is around Gabriel's Wharf, just by Southwark Bridge. We'll tip that onto a large barge and then it will get sent to an energy from waste site just along the river in Kent. And then it is burnt to generate electricity. Like I said, we don't send anything to landfill. All the general waste goes to energy from waste. And because we use the barge system along the River Thames, it's the only system in the whole world that transport waste using a waterway. And this saves around 100,000 heavy goods vehicle movements on London's roads each year. Okay, and then just want to talk a little bit about contamination because I mean, this is a big issue that we'll deal with, and I'm sure I'm talking to the converted with you, and in terms of contamination, and kind of often say, what is it? And there's two kind of meanings: a material in the wrong waste stream or an accepted material prepared in the wrong way. So a material in the wrong waste stream would be if you put food in a paper bin. Well, that's just the wrong item in the wrong bin. An accepted material in the wrong way is if you've got a plastic tub, but it's covered in food, then it's prepared in the wrong way. And following on from that, lots of people ask, we used to call it dry mix recycling, and often people would ask, how clean and dry does it need to be? In reality, we want it to be as clean and dry as possible, because if it's got any sort of food or liquids on it, then it could easily damage. If there's paper in that waste stream, and if you imagine you've got, you know, some baked beans in one bin, and then that bin goes into a bigger bin, that bigger bin goes in the vehicle goes to our facility, and so on, you could damage a lot of high quality papers and cardboard. But we're all lazy human beings, and we don't often do that. So a general rule of thumb that we say is, if you can put the tub on top of your head and you don't fear that you're going to get any baked beans on top of you, then it's okay to be put in the PC stream. If you don't want to do that, in case you get wet, then you put that in the general waste. And we often say that wish cycling is a big issue, especially around the contamination issue, because people think they're doing the right thing, but if you put that in, it could damage other items that could potentially have a second life. So we say, if in doubt, chuck it out, put it in a general waste bin. So here are just some items that we could do as an activity, or I'll just talk through them. A few different items that people are often confused about. So number one is kind of bottle tops. With bottle tops, so that type of plastic is HDPE, so a high density polyethylene, and it can be recycled, but because they're so small, in our materials recovery facility, we've got a fine section that will get rid of the small parts, small things, so they don't get tangled up in our machinery. So if these are put loose into your bin, then they won't be recycled. If they are kept on the bottle, then they will be recycled. But when you put it on the bottle, you need to make sure you squish it and get rid of all the air out of that bottle, because it saves space in the bin, but also If you imagine that bottle's full of air and then it gets put in the back of a vehicle and it's compressed, and then that bottle top could go flying off and hurt someone. So make sure you squeeze the bottle and then put the bottle top back on. Number 2 is paper towels. So paper towels are not recyclable in your PC stream. The reason being they've got like a border strength quality to it that makes it different from paper and can't be recycled in the same way. So they can't be recycled in your PC stream. We have just launched within the last, I would say within the last few weeks, a paper towel recycling stream. So if anyone is interested in launching that into your buildings, then please speak to myself or Scott about how we can do that. Number 3 is that sort of salad bag. That's made of low density polyethylene, so the same sort of thing as your supermarket carrier bags. So it is not recyclable in the normal mixed recycling stream because it's such low quality plastic. You might hear that in Sainsbury's and Tesco's, they'll say, bring your plastic bags back and we can recycle them. That's because they get such large quantities of them, they can recycle them. But if they're just collected, loose or in commercial bins, then they might get tangled up in our machinery. So we remove them and they can't be recycled. Number 4, unwashed pots, tubs and trays. Like I've said, general rule of thumb, if you can put it on top of your head, then it can be recycled. Number 5, stationery. So again, that's made up of so many different parts that it's not currently recyclable in our PC stream. But if you put it in our sustainable box, just like number 6 with the crisp packets, then it can be recycled. So our sustainable box is a new waste stream that we launched recently for hard to recycle items. So just like what the kind of TerraCycle's main USP is, that they recycle hard to recycle items, but maybe not recycling them as we found out. But what we do with them is we collect them and we send them off to Storm Board, and they make them into a hard, rigid plastic, sort of like MDF, used as business or construction hoardings around the place, or they can be turned into worktops, they can be turned into sorting tables. It's just a hard, rigid plastic and can be molded in different ways. And we do lots of different streams for that. So whether it be stationery, whether it be coffee pods, crisp packets, sweet wrappers, different ones like that. So if you're interested in doing that in your building, then again, please speak to myself or to Scott. And then finally, we've spoken a lot and we've learned a few different things about waste and recycling, but we'd like to leave people with a bit of a call to action on what people can do moving forward. So this is kind of things that you can do at home. So we always tell people to educate themselves to avoid greenwashing. Lots of people will say they're doing these great and wonderful things, but you really need to ask questions to make sure what they're saying is correct. And also the A World app, there's lots of different apps out there that can help you navigate this field or learn to do more. Separate your food waste is the big one, and council collections, along with commercial buildings having to do food waste collections, it will be compulsory for councils to provide that service as well, we think in around 6 months' time, which is really exciting. And then finally, at work, we ask people to be bold at work. And the big reason for this is the thing called positive ambition loop. So it's the idea that if you do something, then that encourages other people to do more, which encourages the building to do more, which encourages the business to do more, which encourages the city to do more, and so on. So these changes that are coming through with the environmental legislation, they're being put through because of this positive ambition loop, because people have started doing it and more and more people are doing it, so it becomes more normal. So then the government take action to do more. Along with that, push for change and set ambitious targets and really track what you're doing. So data is king in a lot of things, and the recycling industry, it's becoming more and more important. So make sure you're looking at not just your recycle stats in terms of what your recycle rate, but actually look at what you're bringing into the building, what you're chucking away, what you could maybe move away from single use to more long-term solutions, and really look at the whole circular idea of your waste, what's being chucked away and what's coming into the building, and go beyond compliance. Again, similar to the positive ambition loop, try and